What makes for a memorable video game character? Is it one that embodies the player's values and uniqueness?
Hey, you. You're finally awake.
Is it one whose motivations feel human and emotional?
Her immunity meant nothing.
Is it one whose backstory and purpose are fully realized?
There's nowhere you can hide, Spartan.
Any of these essential questions can make for an exceptional character. But let's make one thing clear. This old man might embody none of those characteristics.
Ooh, is that honey pepper boar bacon?
But boy, if he isn't still the heart and soul of the Psychonauts franchise.
Promise me, only use your power of pyrokinesis only when it's very, very important, or it's really, really entertaining. I promise.
Yes, you've been waiting for this one. Today we're diving into the minds, it's a bit complicated, of the Psychic Six's founder, the legend himself, Agent Ford Cruller.
Well, you shouldn't believe everything you read in True Psychic Tales magazine.
Apart from his absolute zinger one-liners,
Hey, wanna see me shoot something?
You want to see me wring your neck like a mop?
No.
Ford is a far more fleshed out and tragic character in Psychonauts 2 than his side role in Psychonauts 1. It's a testament to how well Doublefine took feedback with their first game and channeled it into more mature writing and characterization in the sequel.
Next lesson, we'll work on your snappy one-liners.
Many have attributed this to Doublefine's problematic use of psychological disorders as a basis for their characters. It might as well be something like, hey, look how funny the confused old man is, rather than this is a character with defined symptoms and perhaps a potential diagnosis.
Congratulations! Now get!
But anyway, regardless of where you stand on Psychonauts 1, in Psychonauts 2, Ford returns with his past explored and his mind explained more thoroughly than any other character.
So that's the reason for all the... Reason's got nothing to do with it.
If the first game was Tim Schafer showing you a quirky old man with a multiple personality disorder, then the second game has certainly leveled up. His personality and his levels closely symbolize an aging person who may be demonstrating severe anxiety that has developed into a dissociative identity disorder.
Well, I just didn't think it would end so badly.
Like many players, I knew Ford would be funny like he was in the first game, but I think I can speak for everyone when I say how emotionally swept away I was by how powerful his character arc truly is. I can't stop thinking about the weight of this line.
She just wanted to help, but they pushed her too far. How should we have known? It's not like she was marked fragile.
It's relatable for someone getting older, it's sad, it's deeply symbolic of how our mind warps the things we don't like. It's easily one of my favorite moments in this entire series. So, join me as I analyze not one, not two, but 3 of Psychonauts' levels that explore the mind of Agent Ford Cruller. Let's talk for a minute about what I do. Okay, no, not this, this. In my incredibly biased opinion, there are few careers that capture the feeling of switching personas quite like teaching a classroom full of students. It's a job where even something as simple as your tone can be used in countless ways to help someone understand something. For example, I might approach a subject like abnormal psychology with a careful but serious demeanor, compared to the topic of emotion, which requires much more outward expressions. But I mean, come on, what does that even mean? To me, it's all about finding the right voice. A voice for exciting and inspiring topics, a voice for morally challenging topics, and a voice for a class that needs to settle down after lunch on a Friday, and one that's barely even awake during the first period on a Monday. To my students, my persona might be difficult to define then. What impression would they have of me? I imagine it'd be pretty complicated. Yikes, I'm sure that would look lovely on an event.
I've got to fire you.
There must be a more positive way to put it. Maybe I read the room well, or I use situational awareness. Maybe I code switch, like the way a detective meets you at the door.
Always mind your surroundings.
But sit down. Let's close this section with I switch identities willingly and for the right reasons. Put a pin in that, and now imagine someone who has anxiety and transitions identities without much control and for the wrong reasons.
Now let's get out of here before that bacon gets cold.
Before we continue, you're probably wondering if this disorder results in 2 or more personalities, as displayed in popular movies like Fight Club or Split. But in 1994, the name was changed to reflect a better understanding of the condition, namely that it's characterized by more of a fragmentation or a splintering of different identities, rather than the growth of separate personalities. So, in my opinion, this depiction of DID is one of the more true to the primary symptoms of the disorder, rather than just another overly simplified stereotype. Our first introduction to Ford Cruller in Psychonauts 2 actually comes in the form of a memory vault inside Hollis Forsythe's mind. It shows a distraught and devastated young doctor who is deeply regretting her decision to tamper with her boss's mind. Ford here is the perfect character to come to her aid, and he offers her a path to work for the Psychonauts to better gain control of her powers and hopefully use them for good. So if you don't get Professor Charles Xavier vibes from this, then you're really missing the comic book tone that Tim Schafer is going for. This is not only a great way to remind us of a beloved character from the first game, but also give him more of a sense of purpose and placement in the overarching story. So not to jump too deeply into spoiler territory already,
You finally made it.
but Ford is an excellent character to offer aid in this situation because he understands the effects such as guilt can have on a person.
I'm an old man, filled with regret, waiting to die.
Fast forwarding a bit, Ford becomes a crucial part of the narrative when Raz needs to...
Find some bacon.
I could explain the story up to this point, but we'll tackle that as we go through his different levels.
Going to ignore that last part because it makes no sense to me. But I trust it.
After retrieving the 5-second rule bacon, Ford is stunned when he realizes he's returned to the mother lobe, and he reveals that
I'm not supposed to be here.
So he's more off than usual, trying to distract himself. And then, after Maligula's name gets brought up, he says a few really odd lines.
The work to do. Shoes to clean, hair to cut, mail to sort.
As if he's not actively thinking about the situation at hand. He's engaging in displacement. It's up to Raz to head into his old mentor's mind to see what has him so rattled. The opening of his mind brings us back to where it all began. At least if you've played the first game and remember Raz's incredible introduction during the first scene almost 20 years ago.
My name
Starts with a D.
is Rasputin.
But this spot is a good indicator to get your nostalgia hats on, because we'll be traveling pretty far into the past from here on out. Oh, a video that explores psychology of nostalgia?
Oh, no. Anyway.
After lighting all the torches, a 7th torch appears, revealing that there was once a 7th member of the team named Lucretia.
She must have been important, or Ford wouldn't have carved her.
Then the tree opens up and we're headed on a journey deep into Ford's unconscious mind. Upon entering the canoe, there's some stuff about how Otto Mentalis originally sent Ford to recruit Lucretia, and it's pretty important for the plot, I guess, but my mind was fixated on this moon that seems to be coming towards us or something. To me, it represents the deepest recesses of Ford's persona. If sunlight were to symbolically show all the visible aspects of a person, with light being shown on them, then what's beyond that shadow into the dark night but the moon? I should mention that this is where the game gets pretty Jungian in its philosophical ideas and symbolism, and Carl Jung could have a video on his own, but to keep things light and simple, Jung, a Swiss psychoanalyst who often studied culture, religion, and mythology, called the moon the preserver of souls. To Jung, this religious metaphor was one of the cross points into the psyche, the bridge that represents the deepest layer of the unconscious mind. And hey, is that what this is meant to represent? And now we're not only inside Ford's head, but Raz also is Ford's head.
That doesn't make sense.
Another beautiful way of showing us his perspective by us actually seeing things as a part of him, and surrounding him, all the parts that would be indications of his personality through like a level are completely shattered. This is relating to his inability earlier to comprehend our situation properly. When Ford does finally appear, he's trapped within what's left of a shattered mirror, representing the fracturedness of his mind and how he sees himself. Ford is also defensive and aggressive when we try to talk about his current mental state. He rationalizes in a few ways to offer an explanation, but like his displacement tactics earlier, these are signs of his apparent anxiety disorder, which will present itself in pieces of Ford's other levels.
Don't bother. I've tried for years. Whoever dropped the kablooey on this man really didn't want to put back together again.
The goal of these levels, then, is to help Ford by allowing him to come to terms with the different pieces of himself in order to fully realize his true self and deal proactively with his negative emotions in a healthy way.
Oh man, I need to find him before I report back to Truman.
Before we go any farther, I should mention why I chose to label Ford's condition as an anxiety disorder. It has a lot to do with why dissociative identity disorder is such a controversial topic among psychologists. That controversy is best understood by looking at the history of multiple personality disorder.
Dr. Wilbur, it's getting worse. Who does those drawings? You do. Well, but you do them as other people. Do you understand? You do them as other parts of yourself. No, I don't. We're still children.
It's impossible to talk about personality disorders and not mention the power of Sybil, a best-selling book turned smash hit miniseries starring Sally Fields.
And I can't deny the fact.
A story that led to a cultural phenomenon and the widespread diagnosis of multiple personality disorders across the country.
My next two guests have an amazing and frightening story. Will you welcome, please, Dr. Cornelia Wilbur and Professor Flora Schreiber. This is just one of the most fascinating cases, I guess, that's ever happened in psychiatric history.
This all culminating in what many people feel was either a misdiagnosed hoax.
Has anybody suggested this is a hoax? He needed some evidence.
Hoax has been breathed down our necks by various people at various stages.
Or a chance to chase the spotlight for a young psychoanalyst rather than a true case study about a rare disorder.
If it were, because this was dreadful to bear. This is true. It doesn't sound plausible. It doesn't sound possible.
But the discovery of multiple personality disorder doesn't actually begin with Cornelia Wilbur and her diagnosis of Shirley Mason, who went under the pseudonym of Sybil. An earlier well-known case was in the 1950s with a patient called Eve, who doctors believe had 3 distinct personalities.
Could I speak with Eve Black, ma'am?
Sure.
Eve Black?
This groundbreaking study also turned into a popular feature film in 1957 called The 3 Faces of Eve, a film that sparked fascination with the public and surprisingly little criticism. Multiple personality disorder was becoming a hot topic among the psychological community. That spark would soon ignite when millions of people became captivated and seduced by the story of Shirley Mason and the release of Sybil in the 1970s. Her story was traumatic, an emotionally harrowing portrait of abuse and recovery that stunned the public, but it was ultimately fraudulent. In Sybil Exposed, writer Debbie Nelson argued that most of the story is really based on a lie. When the claims against Sybil were raised and scrutiny began to grow, Nathan provided evidence that Mason never displayed multiple personalities until she met Dr. Wilbur. The patient's symptoms emerged over years of mutually reinforced self-deception of both Mason and Wilbur. Add on top of that countless false claims and even Shirley Mason basically admitting that she made it all up years later, and it's easy to see why skepticism and criticism among the psychological community derailed this train as soon as it began picking up steam. Today, the National Alliance on Mental Illness estimates that less than 2% of the population experience dissociative disorders, and that women are more likely than men to be diagnosed. According to experts, the extreme rarity makes it hard to study, and the diagnoses of dissociative disorders remain controversial within the field to this day.
Multiple personality carries with it the implication that they really have more than one personality. That's what the name says. Dissociative identity disorder implies that the problem is fragmentation of identity, not that you really are 12 people. That you have not more than one, but less than one.
So, before journeying into Ford's minds, it might be interesting to think of his portrayal in Psychonauts 1 as rather Sybil-like. The cameos are him as multiple people after all, and not once do we get any information about anxiety or a shattered mind. Psychonauts 2 will have to build upon some of these ideas if it's to display an appropriate portrayal.
Agent Cruller, it's me, Raz. Permission to enter?
Negative. Senior staff only.
Ford, it's me.
And who are you?
Okay, important question. Can dissociative identity disorder lead to memory loss, similar to, like, amnesia? As a matter of fact, it's fairly common in reported cases that people with dissociative identity disorder typically also have dissociative amnesia, and often dissociative fugue, or a loss of awareness during a temporary state. The most extreme case of this is actually another popular story that became known as the hunt for the identity of Benjamin Kyle.
My name is Benjamin Kyle. You don't know who I am, and quite frankly, neither do I.
An unknown person who was found near death in a Burger King parking lot with no ID, no clothes, and no memory of who he was or how he even got there.
He gave himself the name Benjamin Kyle, but authorities couldn't tell him who he really was. Without a social security number, he couldn't get a job or find a place to stay.
Kyle, who eventually was discovered as William Powell, has severe amnesia from being beaten, but also has been suffering from fugue and dissociative disorders since early childhood, sadly leading to a life of different identities across the country, ultimately compounding a near decade-long search for his identity.
Bring back Ford Cruller.
Oh boy, that's a lot of red flags there, Zanato.
Can you bring back Agent Cruller and find out what he knows?
Anyways, let's fast forward to Ford's first mind. Germ Ford, as we'll call him. Wait, Fungus Fugue Ford? Anyways, is busy working hard disinfecting bowling shoes, and he doesn't exactly seem to be enjoying it. So, we're heading into his mind to see if we can help him figure out his first piece of his identity. In The Strike City, we learn immediately that Ford has a relationship with Lucretia, and that this level is going to give off some strong Osmosis Jones vibes.
Well, what do we have here? Somebody been working out. Leah, you looking fine, girl.
But if this level is meant to reference this date where they fell in love, it would appear that it's a memory of Ford's that he sees not only as being relatively hazardous, but also it's practically the end of the world. This negative emotional lens on an important date in Ford's life is expressed by the dread of the germs, who believe they're stuck, soon to meet their destruction. That destruction they call the Big Spray, which is Ford effectively cleaning his tainted memories. It makes sense that he wouldn't want us to get too into this piece of his persona, because it would remind him of that one happy memory that's becoming one that he wishes he could spray away.
Bowlers aren't allowed in here. Now get before I spray.
In these scenes, Ford has to confront and reconcile with his own dimensions of his personality to become whole again, and the dialogue fantastically represents that. This is similar to many other treatments for anxiety disorders. You can even hear him calming himself, a powerful lesson in self-help, handing the bowling ball to himself. 1 down, 2 to go.
Excuse me, Agent Cruller?
Once again, Ford is irritated and buries himself in work, this time as a mailman who's driven himself to frustration with his day-to-day sorting tasks. These are simple behaviors that his mind will show are harmful, avoidant means of coping with his negative emotions. If the first mind of Ford's dealt heavily with his desire to erase memories, then this mind will specialize in his behavioral techniques that help him manage emotional fear. And, as the centerpiece alludes to, he sadly does so rather robotically.
Letter's got no return address. I'm afraid that means the dead letter office for you.
Instead of Ford being made dizzy with the weight of all these emotional communications flowing through his mind, he's chosen to view it all as a factory for processing. This is fine when it comes to things like sorting mail, sure, but the problem is these aren't basic emotions he's filing. These are incredibly delicate and provocative feelings that he's treating like boring work.
You see? My mail just doesn't matter.
The end of this section is moving because as much as Ford is recognizing that Lucy was fragile and her emotions were changed as a result of work, despite knowing this, and potentially because of this, Ford himself has fell into that same trap, losing himself due to the stresses of work, maybe because of the shame or regret or depression, but it's as though he wants to empathize with her better by feeling how she felt.
I guess some packages are better left unopened.
Ford's realization here is important because before he wasn't in control and wasn't aware that he was sorting his mailroom of emotions endlessly to avoid feeling anxiety. He has to accept that he made mistakes and move on productively.
Rasputin,
Agent Cruller, how do you feel?
I've done a terrible thing.
The final mind is the most revealing story-wise, and also the most closely connected to Ford's post-traumatic stress. This is where Ford's grief grows like unkempt hair, his deepest anxiety about how people change as a result of their environment, his facing a storm of emotions. It was difficult for Ford to reconcile with how Lucy changed as a result of war, and so it took away a piece of himself, acceptance. At the end of the level, Ford receives this acceptance from himself to signify that he's ready to reconcile with what really happened to Gorlovia, what really happened to Lucy, and what really happened to himself. Now, normally I'd continue this analysis right up into the Tomb of the Sarcophagus, great name, and I'd do my thing, I'd overthink even the smallest of details, but here's the thing. Aside from traveling deeper and deeper into Ford's subconscious, or the coming together of the different pieces of his mind, there really isn't much to this final level. To me, it's a reminder that psychology isn't just about labeling or identifying disorders and how they exist in the mind. It's about growth and learning to live with different forms of mental stress. I really like that Ford isn't simply better, simply because we restored pieces of him. In fact, quite the opposite. Now the great challenge can truly begin, and despite his old age, it's never too late to become whole again and pursue happiness. Like those examples I mentioned earlier, say Shirley Mason, aka Sybil, she went on to become a prolific artist, eventually teaching art at the University of Rio Grande. One of her closest friends spoke pretty fondly of her before she passed. It took more than 10 years to find the identity of Benjamin Kyle, but he's living a normal life now in Lafayette. He's got, a solid, renewed relationship with his brother who he sees a few times a week. These are good, positive stories of post-traumatic growth that I think Ford is trying to symbolize here.
Do you know where you are? What can you tell me about this place?
To me, these levels are a powerful reminder from, of all people,
Senior League,
that retirement isn't really the end of the road. Sometimes, people even find parts of themselves that they assumed they lost. Thank you for staying with me after so long, everyone, and as always, thank you for watching.